If you've ever played a Supercell game, you know to expect a few things. First, that you're going to be introduced to some sort of highly entertaining gameplay that will probably have you hooked for days. And second, that you can bet you're going to meet some of the most interesting and compelling characters in any game. For these reasons, I've developed a curiosity about the artists that created Clash Royale, one of my favorite games in Supercell's catalog. Because, after all, behind every iconic video game character is an interesting artist. The person who, with a stroke of inspiration, sketched out the figures of our favorite gaming heroes and villains. But the strange thing about Clash Royale is that it's next to impossible to pin down who exactly created the original set of characters in the game. Pick any popular video game character and I bet you can easily find out who created them. Take a look at this guy, for example. One search and you'd learn that Shigeru Miyamoto is credited with creating Mario. Or what about Snake from Metal Gear Solid? That's Hideo Kojima and Yoji Shinkawa's creation. Let's try one from the same platform as Clash Royale. The Angry Birds. Yup, same result. Yako Isalo is who created the Angry Birds characters. Now let's try the same for Clash. Take for example the P.E.K.K.A. Or the Hog Rider. And while there were a bunch of fan theories online about these characters' in-game origins, I couldn't find any clear information about who specifically concepted these two popular characters, or the Barbarians, Archers, Giant, or any of the original troops in Clash for that matter. Strange, isn't it? But the question remained, who were the original artists of the Clash universe? It's important to note here that although these characters show up in Clash Royale, they were originally created for Clash of Clans, the parent game, if you will, to Clash Royale. And it's not that all of Clash of Clans or Clash Royale's character artists are missing from public knowledge. Actually, many of the new characters, especially in Clash Royale, have been credited publicly, and it's pretty easy to find out where the concept art is and who created it. For example, my early research on the subject kept leading me back to this guy, Brice La-Ville St. Martin, one of the lead 3D character designers for both Clash Royale and Clash of Clans. He's been on the Supercell team since August 2017, and he's an absolute beast of a 3D artist. I mean, just look at some of the stuff he's been a part of developing, but all of these characters are from recent years. When I first started my research into this topic, there were absolutely no concrete leads leading me to any one person or group of people. And being that game design is a massive group effort, oftentimes the individual pieces can get lost as a part of the whole. But usually the easiest way to find out who did what on a game is to read the credits. So I looked into the credits for Clash of Clans. Wow, that wasn't very helpful at all. It doesn't even say who did what on the game. I went through every single one of these names and tried to narrow down a handful of people that could actually fit the description of original Clash of Clans concept artist. That person would have to A, have worked at Supercell before the game was released in August of 2012, and B, they would be a part of the visual arts team and not the programming, marketing, or business teams. Which led me to this guy. This is Jonas Collaros. There he is right there in the credits. Jonas is a server programmer that started working on Clash of Clans in 2012, and in this talk at GDC 2015, he gives us a few clues for our search.
What you see on the screen right now, these roughly 13 people or so, comprise everybody at Supercell who has a say in the design of Clash of Clans.
Even though the credits for Clash of Clans show almost 100 people, realistically, there's only about 10 or so that we need to narrow down as a part of the core team.
The very first team that made Clash of Clans did it with roughly half the people.
6 people were the original contributors to Clash of Clans. If we can figure out who those 6 are, then we'll have our missing artists. Another important thing to note is Supercell's philosophy on hiring what they call generalist artists.
Usually we have only generalist artists, so not specifically doing any one thing.
We can all contribute to how we desire the game.
Everybody basically is designing the game, and there's very little like specialization in the team. So
we are looking for generalists instead of specialists. Some of our guys can do like everything from sketching to the final game mod.
Interview after interview, I kept hearing the same phrases, that if you work as an artist at Supercell, you have to be prepared to contribute to all sorts of facets of the game design process, not just specializing in one. I mean, even in the job listings on their main website, the phrase generalist is there. Why this detail is so important to the culture at Supercell and to our search is because every single person should be able to contribute to any facet of the game. There could be one person who draws up the original sketch of a character, and then another who refines it, then another who suggests a change to one aspect, and yet another who tweaks from there, and anyone can contribute to each stage because they're all generalist artists. Which makes our search significantly harder, especially if it turns out that every character is like a Frankenstein's monster of artistic input. Nonetheless, I was able to narrow the list of artists from the Clash of Clans credits down to the following people: Taneli Oksama, Mikko Kodisoja, Veli Vainio, Lassi Leppinen, Lasse Louhento, and Jani Lintunen. This group I affectionately dubbed the Six Builders because all of them were part of the original team that created Clash of Clans. Here are most of them together in this team photo circa 2012. So I began the deep dive. The first of our builders, Taneli Oksama, joined Supercell in October 2011 as a lead artist. As I was trying to learn more about him, I realized he didn't have much of an online presence to work with. Aside from a couple articles from the 90s of previous game companies he worked for and a few Twitter posts from years ago, he was mostly missing from the internet. I couldn't find any evidence crediting him with the creation of any specific troop in Clash of Clans, so I chose to cross him off the list pretty early on. Next up was Mikko Kodisoja. He joined Supercell in May 2010 as a co-founder and game lead. In his role as the first of many game leads for Clash of Clans, Kodisoja probably mainly took an overseeing role on the team. Think of him as more of a big picture guy. Actually, he and CEO Ilkka Paananen had worked together for 10 years before creating Supercell. And here's a quote about what game leads do at the company. As leads, we're not necessarily the people who say, "We do this now." We are the people who enable other people, and that can take very different forms. As a game lead, I enable the team to do their job. That can be, we don't have enough artists, I need to find more artists, or that can be, this guy's computer is too slow. It seems like this is exactly the role that Kodisoja played as game lead for Clash of Clans. So after some deeper research, I also chose to cross him off the list. Veli Vainio joined Supercell in June 2011 as a game designer for Clash of Clans. According to Supercell, the role of a game designer is someone who can lead and drive the overall vision and make sure that every system in the game is tuned and plays well together with the rest. From this, it's pretty clear that Vainio's main contribution to Clash of Clans was designing the overall gameplay experience rather than focusing on the artwork itself. I wouldn't totally rule him out of the artistic design aspect based on what we know about the generalist artists at Supercell, but it's very unlikely that he had a major hand in the creation of the original characters of Clash of Clans, so I also crossed him out. It was about this point in the search that I started feeling pretty discouraged. I'd been looking for days trying to find any leads that I could, but I just wasn't making any headway. So far, I'd basically gotten 3 dead ends. So I decided to reach out to as many Supercell team members as I could in hopes that maybe they'd be able to point me in the right direction. And you would not believe what happened. None of them responded. Was this where my search would end? But then I got a major breakthrough. Lassi Leppinen joined Supercell in June 2010 as a co-founder and tech lead for Clash of Clans. Leppinen describes his role on the game as lead programmer in Clash of Clans and also took care of the economy and balance of the game. This alone didn't really benefit the search much because it sounded a lot like what Veli Vainio did on the game. a focus on gameplay instead of art. But I just had to keep in mind how important it was that everyone had to be a generalist artist. And then it hit me. I was reading through this article from Wired magazine about Supercell written in 2015. Pretty standard affair, things I'd heard a dozen times by now about the company. And then, on one of the final images at the very end of the article was this. A photograph of Leppinen with the caption that read, Supercell's co-founder Lassi Leppinen co-designed Clash of Clans with Louhento. When I read this, I about flipped out of my chair. This was huge. I had found my first major lead into solving this mystery. Could it actually be that these two were the ones who created the original characters of Clash of Clans? The only thing I was missing was at least one piece of concept art that was credited to either one of these guys. So I took a deep breath and kept searching. And naturally, the next person I started looking into was Lasse Louhento. Louhento joined Supercell in August 2011 as a game lead and art director. And to my utter dismay, no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find any artwork credited to him. Nothing on his Facebook page, or Twitter, or DeviantArt, or ArtStation, and I found his IG, but it was privated, so nothing there either. I did, however, find a TEDx talk he did back in 2013 where he showed off a prototype of what the main battlefield in Clash of Clans originally looked like, but he doesn't mention anything about his artistic involvement for the game. And he's quoted here in an article from October 2012 where he talks about the inspiration for Clash of Clans. We had many sources of inspiration along the way. For gameplay, the most important were Travian and Backyard Monsters. This is Backyard Monsters, and you can see right away the similarity to Clash of Clans, which is cool, but still I hadn't found any artwork credited to Louhento. And the deeper I went down the rabbit hole of information on him, the more obscure the articles got. Until I stumbled on a magazine called Sonoma that published an article about Supercell circa 2013. And it was written entirely in Finnish. I really thought I'd read all there was to read on the topic, but I figured I'd give this article a quick skim and call that night of research concluded. As I was skimming, I found a familiar face on the photos within. It was Louhento with a caption that said something in Finnish, so I copy-pasted the caption into Google Translate, and this is what it said. Lasse Louhento is Clash of Clans' father of barbarians. Whatever exchange the interviewer must have had with Louhento that day left him with the definite impression that out of anyone on the team, he alone was the father of the barbarians. To me, this was the missing piece I'd been desperately searching for, validating Leppinen and Louhento with co-designing Clash of Clans. And it's very probable that they were the ones who co-designed the original characters of the game. At long last, Lasse Louhento had been confirmed. And shortly after this, the concept art showed up too. These images show what I believe are some of the first sketches of the barbarian. And if what we've learned about Louhento is true, then he was the one that drew these up. Here we see some more concept art from Clash of Clans, this time also showing the archers and even an early version of the wizard. This was a major victory in the search, and at this point I felt that we'd gotten our satisfying conclusion, but we still had one final builder to look into, and that was Jani Lintunen. Lintunen joined Supercell in January 2012 as a game developer, and he describes his role at Supercell as having worked on multiple games from start to end as an artist and designer, and responsible for the creation of the Clash universe, characters, and whatever needed to be done. This definitely meant that Leppinen, Louhento, and Lintunen all three had major roles in creating the Clash universe. Now I just needed some artwork to back up the claim made by Lintunen. This animation he did for Blender in 2009 revealed that Lintunen sometimes goes under the artistic pseudonym of Jericho. But even searching Jericho Lintunen didn't land me any artwork in his name related to Clash. So I reviewed some of the previous articles that I'd already looked at to see if there was any mention of Lintunen within them. And in a stroke of absolute fortune, I found this. In the same article that linked Lasse Louhento to being the father of the barbarians was a photograph of Lintunen in front of his computer working on none other than a prototype of the Hog Rider. The caption reads, "Graphic by Jani Lintunen, Clash of Clans to Viking characters." Apparently, the Hog Rider was originally going to be a Viking? Seeing this was so satisfying. All of my research had finally paid off. Based on that photo, it's very probable that Lintunen was the one that took this original 2D concept art and sculpted it into this 3D model that we see today. The final builder was confirmed. So now we come full circle, back to that pesky question that eluded us for so long. Who were the original artists of the Clash universe? I believe that it was these three masterminds who did it: Leppinen, Louhento, and Lintunen. Some of our builders remain at Supercell to this day, and others have moved on to various creative endeavors. Interestingly enough though, Louhento and Lintunen both left Supercell around the same time to start their own company called Bit Odd. What this company does, only they know. But one thing is for certain, if they ever go back to designing games together, we're in for one heck of a ride.